Good day everyone, my name is Marcus, and if you are new to this channel, welcome. If you're not, thank you so much for supporting us all this while. Just remember that every like and subscription goes a long way in supporting our production. Now before we dive into today's video topic, have a look at these disclaimers before we proceed. Okay, so for today's video, we'll be talking about something interesting that has happened lately, and it is the news that Apple is planning to build a search engine to challenge Google. Now, just like many of you who are my age, we grew up with Google. We grew up knowing that everything is found on Google. As long as we type something into Google, and if we search hard enough, we will find the answer. And that has always been the status quo for these few years, and many are expecting it to remain as a status quo even in the next decade or so. But many analysts have been talking about how Google's dominance of the search engine landscape could be under threat with reports that Apple is creating its very own search engine. The first thing that many of you must be thinking is that even if Apple creates their own search engine, this doesn't mean that Google's dominance can be taken away, because Google is the default search engine installed on many laptops and even on the MacBook themselves. What makes Apple think that they can challenge Google, especially with Google having collected years and years of data from their own search engine, with an Apple creating a new search engine out of nowhere? They would have no data to work on, no infrastructure to work on, and all the network nodes that Google has access to would essentially give them an insurmountable advantage over Apple. That was what I was thinking at first. But we have to understand that Google right now, their search engine faces intense scrutiny from antitrust authorities in the USA, who are also threatening to curb the search leaders' grip on the entire industry itself. And for those of you who want to dive deeper into the details of why this is so, you could check out the video on Congress questioning Google CEO, which I will put a link to in the description below. We see how Apple has been quietly beefing up its own search offering in the iOS 14 system, which could mean that they are essentially laying the groundwork for their search engine to eventually take over all of Apple's devices in the future. And this is something important to note, because while Apple pays Google 8 to 12 billion per year for their search engine, and it is now ubiquitous on Apple's devices, the fact that Apple has so many phones and so many computer consoles distributed worldwide would mean that if Apple one day decides to make the sudden switch to their own domestic search engine, this could allow them to scale up massively in a very short period of time. And there are also increasing signs that Apple is ready to launch a preemptive strike before the regulators get their teeth into Google. Apple recently hired Google's head of search, John Gyanendra, over 2 years ago, and has been openly recruiting search engineers ever since, to the point where Apple, in a sense, has a behemoth team to take on a more general search engine, according to a former Google engineering chief, Bill Coughlin. There are also signs that the search engine may already be operational and in the making, with webmasters reporting increased activity from Applebot, the company's web crawler, which explores the web in search of new sites and content to index. Apple is also one of the companies that has the resources to take on a tech giant such as Google. With a market capitalization of over 2 trillion, the largest in the world, and around 200 billion of cash to burn, the company has the ability to not only turn away the money received from Google, but to invest in the server infrastructure and network nodes required to create a competitive search engine. But the most important point that many people are missing would be that an Apple search engine would certainly have one massive selling point, and that would be increased user privacy, which is the buzzword in today's times. If you have watched the documentary The Social Dilemma, again, if you haven't watched it, I'll be linking it in the description below. But basically, it's a documentary that talks about how our attention span is constantly fixated on the same few devices, the same few websites, and this is all because of the smart AI algorithm that has designed our preferences and has tailored our likings to what we are searching for, which in a sense captivates us on the device and ensures that we essentially do not turn off our phone. But to break away from this whole trend, Apple has made great efforts to distance itself from rivals in recent years by insisting that privacy is a fundamental human right, I quote them, and one of our core values. And like rivals such as DuckDuckGo, Apple may attempt to build a search engine that doesn't store personal information, nor does it track users across the web. And this is a big win for many of us who are trying to escape the prying eyes of large companies who are trying to take away our personal data and sell it to someone else for a massive profit. That will also be easier for Apple on the regulatory side because unlike Google, it is not reliant on advertising income, considering that it has so much cash to burn, and also that it derives its revenue from the sale of many hardware devices and software as a system. This benefits its personalized data to target users. Now, the only remaining question up for grab to decide whether the Apple search engine will truly become dominant will be whether Apple will look to open up its search engine to the world at large, or restrict its usage to only Apple devices and browsers, which will make it another compelling reason to buy iPhones once they come out. And while Safari is currently used for a quarter of all mobile browsing sessions according to net market share statistics, its desktop share is tiny with less than 4% of market share, almost all of which is on the Mac platform. So if Apple decides to come up with its own search engine and restrict it to their own devices, this could create a massive closed ecosystem which many users would like to be part of, especially since Google does not have such an extensive regulatory system which will protect its users from data theft. Okay, so we have come to the end of today's video, and I really hope that you have learned one key takeaway which you can share with your other friends. Do check out the resources that I've listed in the video below, and let me know what you think of ubiquitous Apple search engine, and maybe could we see Apple taking over the world in the future with such an endeavor. Let me know in the comment section below if you have any other questions as well. Stay tuned for the next video and invest safe.
Ever since the day that you